I tell you what, before we start this morning, why don't you turn to the person, first of all, the person next to you, and give them the best smile you can come up with. Go on, I know it's been hard. Some of you have got to crack a few wrinkles in the right direction, but give them the best smile that you possibly can. How many know a smile is good for people? You know, if someone smiles at me, if my wife smiles at me, I feel so much better than when she doesn't smile at me. I kind of know I've done something really bad if she's not smiling at me. And so I think a good smile is worth 3 months of encouragement. Eh? Okay, maybe it should be 3 days then, eh? And then smile again. We're going to carry on with our series this morning on the whole idea of go again. This is what I believe God is speaking to us about. Everyone say go again. And thank you. An overwhelming response. Thank you very much. And today I want to speak to you about the place that you live in. I'm not wanting your address. I'm not wanting the house, number, street, and district of this region that you live in. I'm speaking about not an actual address, but I'm speaking about the postcode of your life. Everyone say it's your life. So we all live in a place, not just in a house, but we live in a place. There is an environment, there is things by the nature of what we surround ourselves with, the people that we hang out with, the place that we work, the things that we do for pleasure, even if that is kind of getting some guns down at the gym, or whether that's not your gig, whether it's more a pint or two down at the pub. We all live in a space. Our lives mean something, and we have a postcode of our life. And just to remind you of a couple of things that we started with last Sunday with the whole series of Go Again, and that is 2 things we discovered so far. Number 1 is God is after your yes. I said He's after your yes. And for some of you, this is going to be your number 1 yes. This will be the first time that you will have said yes to God. For some of you, it will be a second before you go again. A second yes. It's somewhere where you've been before and you're back again. And it's like, wow, God, I thought my first yes was hard, but you know what, God, it just seemed to be harder to get the second yes out. And for some of you, it's like the 5th yes. But God is after our yes. Whether it's our first, or whether it's our third, or whether it's our 23rd. And the second thing that we observed last week is that often God on our journey, on our life's journey, God often takes us back. Everyone say back. God often takes us back to a place, not so that we can live back there, but sometimes to remind us of something. A place of remembrance, maybe a place that holds a memory for us. Maybe a significant moment that happened in our life. And God takes us back there in order to remind us about some stuff so that He gets our yes, so that we can go forward again and we can go again. That's the idea. Does anybody remember Charlie Brown? You know, famous from the comic strip Peanuts, was in the newspapers for years, and there were lots of characters within this. So Charlie Brown was just a young boy, for those of you who don't know who he is, fictional character, and a bit of a lovable loser. Just a young guy. And I know it is an awe, isn't it? It's like, look, this lovable loser. And there's a girl kind of involved, as there would be, and her name was Lucy. And Lucy was the bossy little girl. You know? A bit like my granddaughters, for those that know them. And so these bossy little girls, and Charlie, and one of the ones that I remember so well is when Charlie Brown had a bow and arrow. This actually is the bow and arrow that I used to play with as a child. It's actually in really good condition for its age. And the guy who bought this for me, it was a gift, was a guy called Prime Amazon. Anybody heard of him? And what happened is, to take you through the story, is that Charlie Brown's stood there with his bow and arrow. He's getting all excited about firing his bow and arrow, and Lucy is stood in the background watching him. And Lucy says, "What are you doing, Charlie Brown?" I'm playing with my bow and arrow. And she's watching intently. And it appears as she looks that there's not a target as such. And he stands. And he aims and he draws back the arrow on the bowstring. And he fires it. And Lucy is watching and keeps watching, and suddenly Charlie Brown, because this is Charlie Brown's take on life, okay? So Charlie Brown, I'm now going to have to get off the stage because the arrow's going off the stage. No, leave it there, it's fine. I thought you were trying to steal my arrow. Lucy's trying to steal my arrow. I'm not that old. Goes to the arrow that's stuck in the ground and gets a piece of chalk and starts to draw a circle around the arrow. Somebody's clicked already. And then draws another circle, like a concentric circle. How many know what he's doing here? Two of you. Of course, he's drawing a target around where his arrow has landed. So he draws another circle and another circle, to which Lucy says, "Charlie Brown, that's cheating." And Charlie Brown looks at Lucy and says, "Do you know what, Lucy? Doing it this way, I never miss." It was worth more than that. And I think that is a little bit like our lives sometimes. We just shoot arrows here, there, and this is what our life looks like. We'll shoot an arrow over here. We'll shoot an arrow over there. And another arrow. And wherever it lands, it's like that was the intended target. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that God intended that our lives would be a little bit more prescriptive than that. Don't you agree? So anyway, I'm not just going to shoot one arrow this morning. You know how difficult this is with a microphone in your hand? Now, we heard an illustration the other night at Lift. Lift is a time where we come together as a church community, have an awesome time in God. Anybody there? A great plug for Lift this morning. If you don't get there, get along. It's awesome kinds of stuff. You can get shot with an arrow and all sorts. And the whole idea of this illustration of the fact that God brings us back sometimes in order so that we can go again is perfectly seen in a bow and arrow, whereby, you know what? God, it's almost like he pulls us back a bit. He draws us back. And you know what? He's not bringing us back because he doesn't like us. He's bringing us back so that we can go again. And so as we pull and draw back on this bowstring, we draw back. How many think I should have a target? Anybody got any ideas of a target in the room that I can go for? Say again. Sorry, madam. I can't hit your husband from here. I wasn't thinking of people. You're really nasty. How about I go for the lights up there? There's a health and safety issue going on here. But the idea is that God, where we are, He's drawing us back. He's bringing us back. And this represents a place. This represents a memory. God wants to bring us back to a place, not so that we live there, because that would just be familiar. And we talked about that last week. That's not the best way. Faith is the best way. But God wants to bring us back. Everyone say back. And as he brings us back, I mean, no, that was pretty poor. That was nowhere near the lights. I've got one more arrow. I'm going to have another go. Yeah, this talk means nothing this morning except the fact that I'm having a great time as a boy, all right? Are you learning the lesson? This is the question. Here's another thought I had before. So the idea that God brings us kind of back to a place so that he can send us forward again and with great thrust. You know, we create, with this bow and with this string, we create a great energy when it's pulled back. There is a reason that God brings us back to a place. And here's the deal, right? To the point that we draw back, to the point that we draw back to God in our life, to the point that we draw back so he can show us some things that we can go again, to that point that he brings us back is kind of a definition of how far we'll go. Oh dear. I'm not finishing the example with that. We've got to do better than that. I reckon if I fire this towards you lot, it'll work better. Let me just find someone I don't like. I'm not doing very well at this. To that point that he brings us back, almost shows us how far we're going. It determines. It's the determinant factor. The determinant factor of how far we go is how far he draws us back. There you go. How's that? And there we go. No, I actually love that person sat there. Sorry. And that's kind of the way that the example goes. But let me just bring you back to a point of the story of the Israelites. These were God's people, and God had delivered them from Egypt. And I said that, you know what? God brings people back to a place so he can take them forward. God brought them back. And in the Old Testament, there's this great story, this whole narrative of the Israelites, and they were in one place, and then they came back to almost the same place. And so they find themselves on this day stood by the banks of the river Jordan, the east side of the river Jordan, bearing in mind that they'd been before open waters many, many years before. The whole of the Israelites, when they came out of Egypt, they stood before open waters, which was the Red Sea. And God did a great miracle to take them forward back then. Now we stand on this day with the Israelites 40 years on. Imagine that. They've been wandering around for 40 years, and now they find themselves on the banks of the River Jordan 40 years on. One or two things that I noticed, of course, as you read the scripture, is that at this point there is an entirely new generation of people. Think about it. Think about this church community from 40 years ago. Some of you can remember it 40 years ago. But think about the fact that now we have almost a completely new generation of people, and that's what it looked like by this river. It was the same setting. So they were before open water. God had done some things before, and God was bringing them back to a place to remind them of his power and his glory so that he could send them out again, they could go again. That's kind of the deal. They were stood on the east banks of the Jordan, overlooking their inheritance. Imagine that. You can see what God has for you, but you're stood on this side. God's there saying, look what you could have had. No, but God wanted them to have it. And they're stood overlooking this river and wondering how on earth, not remembering what God did in the past, they're thinking, how do we get to that inheritance? So they're looking at their inheritance. I want to remind you that many of the people that would have been stood there on that day, many of them were riding on the back of their parents' yes many years ago. Think about that. But now they had grown up, this new generation, and now they had the chance to grasp it for themselves and go. I believe there are many of you like that today. Many of you may have grown up in this church community. You may still be riding on what your parents' yes was. It's now time to grasp what God has for you and to go. But then this happens. It's what I call a reasonable request. Now, the version I'm going to read this to you from is very slightly different than what you'll have up there, but I'm going to turn around for the last line because I like it better in the NIV version than the NLT version, which I'm going to read to you from Numbers 32 and the first few verses. Listen along. So here's them stood by the river, and this is what happens. The tribes of Reuben and Gad, so these are all the tribes of the children of Israel. There were 12 of them. The tribes of Reuben and Gad owned vast numbers of livestock. How many know we can be blessed and God can be doing some great things for us, but actually the game's not over? There's still more to do. These people had reached a place. And it was good. They had plenty of livestock. God had blessed them. I want you to know that just because you are blessed, just because you are living in the prosperity of what the teaching of this house and what you've put into your life over years, doesn't mean that God's finished with you and you can just stay there. The tribes of Reuben and Gad owned vast numbers of livestock. So when they saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were ideally suited for their flocks and herds, they came to Moses, who was the leader, Eleazar the priest, and the other leaders of the community. They said, notice the towns, goodness me, look at these towns. Notice the towns of Abram, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heskin, Eliela, you couldn't have a name in Wigan like that, could you? Eliela, Sibmar, Nebo, and Buckshaw. The Lord has conquered this whole area for the community of Israel. And it is ideally suited for all our livestock. If we have found favor with you, please let us have this land as our property, as our possession, it says in the NIV version. Do not make us cross the Jordan. Moses, we have found stuff that suits us. It's suitable for us. Don't make us go again, Moses. I can hear them even all that time ago. Moses, we've come so far. Don't make us go again. Let us stay here in this postcode. We've arrived here, Moses, and it suits us. Does this ring any bells? We have arrived here, God, and this suits our lifestyle. It smells good. Everyone say smelly. It smells good. Moses, smell the land. Smell the animals on the land, the prosperity that we have here. You can almost smell it in your nostrils. It's a good place to be. Look at the place. It looks wonderful. It feels good, Moses. Do you know what, Moses? It feels right. You know, sometimes you come to a place and you think, wow, we've made it. This just feels right. This is how they were, and they were pontificating with Moses and saying, Moses, let us stay here. Moses, the air is good. No CO2 emissions here, Moses. Let us stay here. And by the way, let me just throw in, not to try and manipulate you in any way, Moses, but you know what? The kids love it too. They love this land and the places that they see. Moses, we feel like we're prospering in our life, where we live, so let us stay. And I got to wonder when I read this. I wonder where you are right now. I wonder where you're living right now. I wonder what the postcode of your life looks like. Because here's the deal. God's bringing us back so that we can go again. God is not bringing us. God has not brought us to where we are today in all its glory, in all its fun, in all the wanderings that we've had, in all the hard work that it's taken, in all of the challenges that we've had, in all the blessing that God has given us, in all the new people that God has brought to faith, in so many things in this wonderful space that God has allowed us to build for His glory and for this town. And so many other things and stories that we could tell of God's grace and God's goodness. He's not done all of those things to bring us to this place to stay. That was never His intention and His purpose. But I wonder where you're living right now. What is the postcode of your life? And you may say this morning, do you know what, Dave? You're saying all these things, but today I'm living in a suitable place. Dave, we've arrived where we are as a family. And it is a good place. Thank you very much. And we want to settle here. You know what, Dave? It suits us just to have our of involvement. It suits us to be on the periphery of all that we are and all that we do. It suits our lifestyle with what we have gained and where we have come to. Thank God for all He's taught us. We've put it into practice and we are in a good place. Plus, you know what, Moses? There are no giants on this side of the river. So thank God that you brought us to this place. And my challenge and my heart towards you all this morning, every single one, whether it's your first Sunday in or whether you've been coming here for decades, thank God for all of you this morning. This is what I believe in life. In life, we often stop at the point of our suitability. And I want you to think about that. This Sunday, I'm kind of giving half of this talk. I kind of recognize that I went on forever last week, and I thank God for the great feedback that you've given. But I halved my notes this week. How many know that's not going to make a scrap of difference? But I want to continue with this thought and this theme next week, and so I'm going to leave you hanging kind of in the air with this thought, and I have more things to bring on this subject. But I want you to think about life. I want you to think about the postcode of your life. How suitable is that for you at this time? We often stop at the point of our suitability. But let me tell you something. Suitability is the killer of destiny. Suitability is the killer of destiny. God, we're in a good place. You've blessed us. Suitability robs us of our destiny. And we find that there were a group of people in this scenario that wanted to stay where they were because it was suitable. Everyone say suitable. I want to tell you that suitability is the killer of destiny, because destiny lies over the other side of the river. How many know that there's a crossing going to come? God is bringing us back to a place that we recognize. A place that we've been to before, and maybe you're too young to remember, too young in the faith to remember some of the things that have been crossed before. But God has this habit of bringing us back to a place and reminding of His goodness and His power and His faithfulness, so that He can take us to the next place, so that we can go again. Your destiny lies on the other side of the river. You are where you are. We are where we are. But our destiny lies on the other side of the river. And here they were, stood on the east side of the River Jordan. And the inheritance was on the west side. Everyone say west. Anything less than west isn't best. Came up with that one myself. I can see you absolutely enthralled with that. The suitability, let me tell you this. The suitability of where they had arrived. So this is speaking about God's people. The suitability of where they had arrived took precedent over where they should have been heading. Take that in. The suitability of where they had arrived took precedent over where they should have been heading. And it is so easy to do. Let me tell you what happened here. It says, I want to introduce something now that I'll continue on with next Sunday morning. Let me tell you what I believe happened here, what they'd done here, what the deal was here, of all these people that came to Moses, and what you would think is just a reasonable request. You know, for the safety of our kids, let us stay where we are. It was a reasonable request. I want to tell you, God isn't reasonable. Oh. Maybe save some of that till next week. But this is the deal. This is what had happened. Or this is what they'd done here. Simply, in a few words, they'd found the answer. Everyone say the answer. They'd found the answer. This was the level of their thinking. Moses, we've got the answer. We found the answer. It's called the postcode of Gilead. So let's live in it. They'd found the answer. Ironically enough, it was having the answer that would stop them moving forward into their full inheritance. We think having the answer is a good thing. We all need answers. Let's live in the answer. Let's find the answer and live in it. How many know we need answers? But these guys had the answer, and it was the answer that would stop them going full on and going again into the full promises of God. Effectively, they would take on a bogus inheritance. Now, as I address us, maybe this morning you've got the answer. You know what, Dave? Been living this life a long time. Me and my family have been coming here a long time. We've got the answer. We've put into practice all the teaching that we've heard over the years and put it into our lives, and we've found that God blesses us, God prospers us, and we're in a good place. You know, I'm really pleased because God wants your life to prosper, I believe. But we're in a great place, Dave, and you know, we found the answer. The level at which we are living, the things that we are living in and we are involved in, the postcode of our life is in a good place, thank you very much. So what's all this go again thing? We have found the answer. We're not looking for something else because we found the answer. Am I getting through here? We found the answer. So maybe you've got the answer for the postcode of your life, and maybe you are living in it right now. But let me tell you, as back in the day, and God, I believe, is the same today with what He says to us, is that your current answer is possible to rob you of your God-intended future. That today's answer, the postcode of your life, the way that you're living, you may think is good, but can be the very thing that can rob you of God's best. You see, your destiny doesn't lie on the east side of the River Jordan. And anything less than west isn't best. And I'm going to pause right there. And I want us to bow our heads and pray for a moment. Let's just be still, just in the presence of God. You know, I'm so glad that earlier on in our gathering that Hannah stood and challenged our life literally about our yes. And for some of you, you said yes to Jesus for the first time before. What an incredible moment. And I'm not going to do a big appeal, a big challenge this morning. I just want some of these things that I've shared with you and you've heard today just to rest. I want them to rest in your spirit. I want them to go into your head and kind of move down into your heart. And as we've been challenged last week about coming back to a place, and I believe God has been showing some of you about the place that He's bringing you back to, He was never going to take you back there just to be the same. He was never going to take you back there so that you could live in the familiarity of the past because you felt secure. The reason that God was taking you back is solely so that He can get you to cross that river to the full inheritance that God has for you and your family and this church community. And let's stand in God's presence. Come on, everybody standing together. I just want to pray for you and just leave this on pause, because what I want for you to do over this next week is not only contemplate where God is bringing you back to, but also I want you to consider what is the present or the current postcode of my life. Where am I living my life? What space am I living my life in? What am I giving my time to? What is my life all about? Bringing it back straight to God. Coming back to our first love. And I want to give you the opportunity to consider those things. Because the reality is God is taking us forward. And He wants us to go again.